Hey, welcome into the Stinkin Truth podcast alongside Richie Carnie, sitting in for Mike Evans. I am Mark Schlereth, and tons of news, tons of news. I'll get to the fact that FS1 canceled my show on Breakfast Ball on FS1. I'll get to that because, sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail, Richie. First off, Vandal weekend. A lot of people ask me how Vandal weekend went.
Yeah.
Not so good. I'm an idiot, if nothing else. So I'm traveling back from New York last week to go to Spokane, Washington, Vandal weekend. It's the reunion I do with the guys I played college football with 28 straight years.
Wow.
We have done this. It is unbelievable, right? We're so connected. It's one of the things that really hurts me over the NIL stuff, right? Where guys become mercenaries. Man, I am so connected with the guys that I played college football with, that I went to school with. We are thick as thieves. We still have the text line. We still watch out for each other. We're still involved in each other's lives. And so I was heading out to Vandal weekend. So this is just so typical of me. And it's funny. And Richie, you've known me for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly flighty and forgetful at times. And so anyhow, I land in Denver, and my connection's supposed to be 2 hours. Well, I've only got like 45 minutes, so I scurry across the across the tarmac there, right, to another gate. And I'm standing at the gate. I'm about to board, and so I text my boys and say, "Hey, man, I'll be in Spokane at 5:30 tonight. I'll swing by Walmart, pick up ice, you guys need more beer, whatever you need, let me know. I'll pick it up." And I send the text, and I get a call from one of my buddies. "Dude, what are you doing? We changed the weekend." I go, "No, you did. You're full of crap. Stop it." Well, I changed the weekend. He goes, "No." And I was like, "Come on, you didn't change the weekend. Stop it." And I'm like, "Okay, we changed the weekend." Woo, all right. So I hang up with him, and I realize, wait a minute. If they were at Vandal, he's like, "I'm in Seattle in a coffee shop, dude." And I'm like, wait a minute. After I hang up with him, I go, uh-oh. He's stone cold sober.
Right.
He'd be coming off the boat right about now, getting ready to
too clean.
Right. Great. I go, oh no. So then I call about 3 other buddies, and they are howling. I am the laughing stock, right? So I walk up to the gate. I cancel the rest of my flight. I happen to be in Denver. I catch an Uber home. My grandkids are there. My son flew in for the weekend, and I am like the hero arriving at my house, like, Popo's home. I'm like, "Hey, everybody, I'm home." My wife is like, "What are you doing?" And I go, "Well, had the weekend wrong."
Listen, time with the boys is important, hon, but time with family is the most important.
Time with you and the family, that's what I'm all about. So anyhow, so I come the conquering hero. I come home. But listen, even when I don't have a plan, God's got a great plan for me, because my grandkids came home. My oldest granddaughter has gone through all the baptism courses, but hasn't been able to find a weekend because of my son's baseball season, and we went on vacation and everything else. So she got baptized at our church on Sunday. So Vandal weekend got postponed to this weekend. I'm going here on Thursday to Vandal weekend. I changed my flights. They were all miles tickets anyway, so it didn't really cost me anything. And I got see my granddaughter get baptized. So even when Stink doesn't have a plan, God has a plan, man. I got to see it. It was awesome. It's great to be a part of it for the weekend. And so anyhow, that's what happened for Vandal weekend. So it goes on this weekend. And then I got the news yesterday that they canceled the show. Heard about that on social media before the executives from Fox actually called me, which is always a nice way to find out. But bottom line is, man, listen, I got an opportunity to do something that I didn't know I'd ever get the opportunity to do. And I am so grateful to all the people at Fox, for all the guys that I work with, Ethan and Ketta and Zach and the guys, on support staff. You got Scott, you got Ian, you got Staloff, you've got Mikey, you got Troy, our research guy, for Danny Parkins and Craig Carton, who have become lifelong friends. Listen, man, what an unbelievable 10 months. And you know what? The other thing is, Rich, you knew I grew up dyslexic, and you know, we have a nickname for me in the shop there at the radio is the Butcher, because when I have to read a live script, I'm like, oh shoot, here we go. Let me, and you got a lot of work to do because you got to chop that damn thing up and go sentence by sentence to put it together half the time. But really, man, I've conquered that fear of reading out loud, that anxiety that takes me back to my childhood when I couldn't read and I was made fun of for being stupid. And you know, and has haunted me my entire life. That anxiety is over now. And I got to the point over the last 10 months, it's not as quickly as I wish it would have been, but I got to the point where I actually could run the show and be smooth and have fun and not worry about the anxiety of reading out loud and all those things. And so for the people who hired me at Fox, man, I have nothing but the utmost thanks. I'm sorry it ended. I'm sorry we couldn't make it work out. But I'll be forever grateful, man. I've developed a new skill set over the last 10 months that I never thought I would have, and I never thought I had. And so for that, I'm grateful and I'm thankful. Is it a pain in the ass to, you know, have an apartment here in New York and have a house that's on the market in Denver? Yeah, that's a pain in the ass. It's a bit unsettling. But the bottom line, man, is I'm a man of faith, and I am just grateful that I had that opportunity. And we move on. Still going to come back and do the radio show in Denver. We'll see what that carries. I'm still supposed to be doing games on Fox, so hopefully that doesn't go away. But if it does, you know what? We'll deal with that bridge when we have to cross that. So for all those, like I said, involved, and listen, man, to everybody who watched on FS1. Who's supported me, who's reached out to me. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And to all the people that celebrated me getting fired and our show, ending, I thank you guys too, because ultimately one thing I've learned in this business, you kind of want 50% of the people to love you and 50% of the people to hate you. And as long as you got that ratio, things are good. You're doing your job. And, you know, it's never been one of those things where I've never been a hot take guy. I've always told you what I think, based upon all the stuff that I study and all the film that I look at and all the coaches that I have relationships with and all those things. And I will continue to do that. So I would just say, man, like I said, I am just grateful for the opportunity. And I'm sorry to the guys that are part of the show that we couldn't make it work out, but developed a lot of lifelong friendships, and those guys are special to me. So anyhow, that's the whole story there with them canceling Breakfast Ball, and no animosity here, man. I'm just grateful that I had 10 months to run. So there you go.
Well, I will just say, you know, Mark, as long as your NFL career was, your broadcasting career up to this point is just as long in the tooth, and the things that you've been able to accomplish in your post-playing career, I would imagine there's only a small group of us media industry professionals who wouldn't trade in what we have and what we've done for what you have and what you've been able to and will continue to do. You know, I often, not even semi-jokingly, you know, credit you for my place in this sports media landscape. You having great taste in restaurants and where you want to take Mrs. S out to eat has certainly impacted my future in the way that I, you know, plan to carve out a path and do things of that nature. And so some doors can't stay open forever, right. But this certainly won't be the last door that finds itself open for you, you know, in the broadcast space.
I appreciate that. You know, just the story to take you guys behind the curtain. My wife and I were eating at Perry's Steakhouse, and Richie was serving us. Mm-hmm. And Richie says to me, and I didn't know him, he goes, "Hey man, you know, I really like the sport, whatever it was, Michigan State, and I like sports, and you know, and I'd really like to get into the business and radio and this, that, and the other." And I was like, "Give me your card. I'll take it to our PD." And so I got a number and a card. I took it to our program director. I said, "Hey man, this kid was awesome. And you know, he's passionate and really wants an opportunity." And they gave you, I don't even know what it was, internship or whatever. And you went out
weekend, overnight board op.
Yeah. And you've been crushing it. You've been crushing it ever since. So, yeah, we'll forever be connected on that as well. So anyhow, all right, all that stuff aside, all the sappy stuff aside, man, let's get to the National Football League and the Stinkin Truth. What's going on, buddy?
Well, listen, I think the talk of the town in the NFL world right now is at the wide receiver position. You've got on one end the fruitful, where Garrett Wilson signs a $130 million contract extension and the wide receiver money that continues to grow and grow and grow is on an ever-reaching pace. And then on the other end, you've got everything going on with the 49ers wide receiver room where Juwan Jennings wants a new deal or a trade, one or the other with no in between. And reports are circulating that he's looking for Cooper Kupp, Jerry Jeudy type of money. But then outside of Juwan Jennings, you've got Brandon Ayuk coming off a major knee injury with his ACL. Deebo Samuel's now a Washington Commander. You've got off-field potential DUI suspensions in that room. Ricky Pearsall obviously dealing with recovery from what he experienced in the last 12 calendar months. So starting with the Jets, Mark, what do you make of the Garrett Wilson signing and what it means to that team going forward?
Yeah, obviously, Garrett Wilson's a dynamic player, had 100-plus catches last year, like 1,100 yards. I think they were both his career highs in his third year. The guy is definitely dynamic. There was some issues and consistency issues with that offense, Aaron Rodgers last year. And ultimately, if Justin Fields is going to take that leap, he's going to need a guy like Garrett Wilson to be great. Garrett Wilson was great last year, even though that offense wasn't great for the Jets last year. Dynamic, just playmaker at the wide receiver position. There's no question about that. The wide receiver position in general befuddles me a little bit because I think it's one of the more overrated positions in all of football. But one of the issues, with today's NFL is we're going to throw it 65, 70% of the time. So we got to have our guys. We got to have those one-on-one matchup guys we've got to have. And those guys those guys can make big plays and change a game really quickly. I think there's part of that. You have to have the balance to have that done. You can put up a lot of numbers and still lose a lot of games. Garrett Wilson, case in point with Aaron Rodgers last year. So you can put up big time numbers. You mentioned wants that Jerry Jeudy contract. We're talking about not Garrett Wilson, but talking about Juwan Jennings. Well, I think Jerry Jeudy, even though he had a breakout year last year for the Cleveland Browns, I still think they won 4 games last year. So, it doesn't necessarily wide receiver production doesn't necessarily mean, playoffs and Super Bowl championships. And that to me ultimately is what it is. So I do happen to think it's somewhat of an overvalued position. There are guys who are special. Justin Jefferson is special. Jamar Chase is special. I think Terry McLaurin's one of the most undervalued, underrated receivers in football, and he and Washington are having their disputes over his contract. So there's a lot of guys want to get paid, and I understand it has become more and more of a passing league. So I get that aspect of it. To me, that's not necessarily really a path to winning championships, though. So there's this kind of juxtaposition I find myself in. I understand the value of it. I understand how important it is, but I also understand the value of everything else that surrounds it so that you can have that success. I always joke around. 10 other guys have to do their job really well for you to even touch a football. So, understand that. I'm glad for Garrett Wilson, good kid. And I'm really glad I met his father at an airport. And what an outstanding family, outstanding gentleman his father was. So really happy for him and for the ascension and the development of Justin Fields. I think this is incredibly important because Justin Fields is one of those guys, Richie, that when you watch him, like when I watched him initially as a young player, and I had a couple of Chicago games when he was a rookie, second-year player, I likened him to my golf game. Mm-hmm. And what I meant by that was I would go out and, you have 18 opportunities to hit a drive. And I would shank one, pull one, slice one. And all of a sudden I'd be on 16 and it'd be a par 5 and I'd pipe one down the middle, 325. And I'd be like, damn, I got it. I'm back on. I'm in again. And that was his game, man. You'd see him, airmail one, dip one, bounce one into the ground. You'd see one not, just be nowhere near where it's supposed to be. And all of a sudden, man, he'd have that dagger concept where that inside receiver would clear out and that outside receiver at 18 to 20 yards would cut back inside. And that bad boy was on a rope, just wham, hit the receiver in stride. He'd be taken off down the football field. And you'd be like, man, if you could just make that a repeatable motion, that this guy could be great, because when you start looking at Justin Fields, his ability to run the ball, his ability to do all the RPO stuff and the run option stuff that he has, dude is dynamic, and you got to have a playmaker outside for him to kind of have that. Even when he had DJ Moore back in Chicago, man, they got him from the Carolina Panthers. DJ Moore put up numbers. So I think Garrett Wilson will put up numbers. You just like to see that transition, him to just get better and better. And I thought he was making strides in Pittsburgh last year under Arthur Smith, their offensive coordinator, the way they were running the ball and the way, he was orchestrating that, not turning it over as much and all that stuff. So really good for Garrett Wilson. I think it bodes well for the Jets, and hopefully, it helps that continued development of Justin Fields, because if he can figure it out, and he's gotten better every year, I do think he could be the solution at quarterback for the Jets. In regards to the Niners, man, I have an affinity for Kyle Shanahan. I've known Kyle Shanahan since he's probably 12 years old. He was on our sidelines, on Super Bowls. He's the last guy ever in Super Bowl history to hold the cord for the head coach before they went to wireless. Yeah. So he was holding Mike Shanahan's cord in Super Bowl 33, and then the next year, I believe they went to cordless. So he's the last cord holder for a Super Bowl head coach. Like, this is how ridiculous, like how long I've known Kyle Shanahan for. And they had so many issues last year. Deebo Samuel was fighting. Deebo Samuel was unhappy with his, situation there. He wants to become more of a wide receiver and less of a gadget player. Then you had Ayuk, who, was upset and held out and, and finally got the contract, then blew his ACL out in week 7. And then now it's Juwan Jennings, who got his opportunity. And I'll give Juwan Jennings a ton of credit, man. That dude balled out of control. First and foremost, he's always been an antagonist, right? That dude is a tough-ass football player. Played quarterback. Was a backup quarterback for the Rocket Man back in the day at Tennessee. Wow. And then transitioned. Yeah. So what's that cat's name? Dobbs. Yeah. He was the back. Dobbs. Yeah, Joshua Dobbs. He was the backup for Joshua Dobbs, Tennessee. Transitioned over to wide receiver. That dude I called the game late in the season against Arizona where he got kicked out of the game because he's just trying to fight people, man. He is tough, but he showed that he could be that next guy. He showed that he could be an X receiver. He showed that he could do a lot of things well. And he's got that toughness and that ability to block people and all those things. So he's sitting at $7.5 million this year and saying, "Hey, dude, I want to get mine. I'm not asking for, the kind of money that Jamar Chase got or the kind of money that Jefferson gets, but I should be getting $20 million a year." And, frankly, if he's going to be the start next, because I don't think, I think they're going to start the season with Ayuk on PUP. Like, does he deserve 20? Somewhere in there, like 17, 8, whatever it is. And so I hate to see this for the Niners because they had a lot of that angst and a lot of that grief and a lot of that things just don't feel right attitude about the Niners. And it felt like this offseason was more about let's get these things rectified. Ricky Pearsall really came on, played well. Ayuk will be back. We found and developed Juwan Jennings. We got some young players on the defense that will take over for Hufunga, who's now in Denver, Greenlaw, who is now also in Denver. I just felt like, hey, man, calm seas are going to be important. And now all of a sudden, right before training camp, the Niners are dealing with issues again, contract issues with Juwan Jennings. That to me, Richie, feels like a recipe for disaster and a problem for a quarterback that you just paid, that you still probably have deep down inside a few questions that have to be answered.
Yeah, I was just about to say, when it comes to overvaluing, undervaluing, or finding that sweet spot in the wide receiver position, it's pretty heavily dependent on and tied to the quarterback. And in the case of the 49ers, they, at least from a financial standpoint, have made the statement that they feel confident they've found an answer by paying Brock Purdy, a guy who was gone from Mr. Irrelevant to starting in a Super Bowl to being in an NFC Championship game, and being someone that they think they can ultimately cross that mountaintop that Jimmy Garoppolo, could not. And some of their previous quarterbacks, Alex Smith and the like, could not. So even if it's just out of obligation to the window they feel like they found themselves in now with the defense of the caliber that they have, the quarterback that they just paid, is there somewhat of an obligation on behalf of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch to concede to the demand of a Juwan Jennings if it's Cooper Kupp, Jerry Jeudy style of money, and pay him to lock in a playmaker after you let Debo walk? You're dealing with Ayuk coming off a big knee injury, and you've got off-field issues and possible suspensions at other areas. Do the 49ers almost owe it to Brock Purdy and to themselves to just, even if it's, hey, we got to pay a little bit more than we need to lock a guy in that they know that they can be a 17-week kind of receiver for him week in and week out?
Yeah, listen, man. Juwan Jennings is one of my favorite players in the league. The dude is a badass. I mean, he's just a badass. And last year, I think he went from just being a badass that mixes it up, that, when you want to insert a wide receiver, motion him in, insert him, block a safety, you want him to be a part of the running game, you want him to do some things like that. Like, that dude is a full-grown ass man. Like, he is all that. But what they found out last year is, damn, guy is actually pretty decent wide receiver as well. And so, I think they readjusted his contract, if I remember correctly, last year a little bit. Like, I think if I'm the 49ers, I'm like, hey, man, I want continuity. I don't want going into camp. I don't want issues. And I don't want to necessarily acquiesce to the demands of a guy. But can we do what Denver did last year, for instance, with Courtland Sutton? Can we come back to him and say, hey, listen, man, we're going to incentivize your contract. You've got a base of $7.5 million. We're going to bump you up to 13. And then we're going to give you some incentives, playing time, how many catches you have, all that kind of stuff. You can earn 20. Let's do this 1 year, like whatever. Let's do this 1 year deal. Because if we don't have to trade you and we can just make you sit and get $7.5 million. So I've got to believe that the Niners understand the value of Juwan Jennings, especially kind of what he does in the run game, how they're built and constructed as a football team with Ayuk coming off the ACL from week 7. I've got to believe that they'll be able to find a little bit of common ground, make him happy for at least a year, and then deal with the consequences of that later. But this is one of the things that I had talked about in regards to Denver last year. They always have this time of year, all these lists, right? And one of the lists was, hey, the strength of your roster. Where does each team line up from a strength of roster standpoint? And when the Broncos came out, I had just started doing, when this list came out, I just started doing the FS1 TV show. And it was, hey, the Broncos ranked, I think, 30th or 31st on most of these lists. And the way I addressed that was, it's just asinine, because, it's 30 or 31st because there's no name value here.
Right.
But if you actually watch the guys play, like, they've got a really good roster. And obviously I was proven correct in that, because they had a top level defense and they won a lot more games than people anticipated. Their over under was 5.5. And I was like, on every platform I was on, pound the over, you'll win money. And of course they went 10-7. Like, I look at San Francisco, because I did a game last year at the end of the year. Pearsall in the last 3 or 4 games was playing his ass off. Mm-hmm. Juwan Jennings was like becoming a real true X, and still had that ability to, run the jet sweeps and do all the things that Debo did, and still fighting in the run game and all that kind of stuff. So they had all these kind of assets that were developing under Kyle Shanahan, because so many guys got injured on the defensive side of the ball. Man, they had 3 or 4 defensive backs. Mustafa was like, that dude was just killing people, like literally killing people. And so I kept looking at him going, like, this team is really their prime. So when they let go of Debo and they let go of some veteran players like Greenlaw and Hufanga, where everybody else is panicked, like, oh, the name value is gone. I was like, nah, don't worry about the name value. They've developed some young players, that can play. And so I like kind of where they are right now. I just think that it's vital that they get Juwan Jennings addressed and get him, happy and in camp. And I'm not saying acquiesce to all his demands, but make it equitable and make it fair.
there was a narrative that prevailed throughout the majority of last season and certainly deep into the postseason that is kind of rearing up again. And it centers around Eagles quarterback, the reigning Super Bowl MVP, Jalen Hurts. His head coach, Nick Sirianni, came out recently and ripped those who push forward the negative narrative that the Eagles as a roster, which is stacked on both sides of the ball, carried Jalen Hurts more than he, as the franchise quarterback and the starting quarterback, helped carry them en route to a Super Bowl victory. Mark, I think Jalen Hurts is one of the more fascinating case studies at the quarterback position in recent NFL history, considering the fact that when you look at his record as a starter, his team success, he's a Super Bowl champion and Super Bowl MVP on the early bright side of his career. And yet, I think if you asked a lot of fans, media members, and maybe even NFL execs and personnel alike in an anonymous survey, who they would like to start a franchise with at the quarterback position, I think there's got to be, 7, 8, 9 names that you might hear picked over Jalen Hurts in that category. Where do you come down on Jalen Hurts, who's proven to be a winner at the highest level, but still presents some fairly reasonable suspicions or suggestions about what he can bring to a team at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I think you look at kind of the style of the offense. You look at how well they're built offensive line wise. You look at what Saquon Barkley was able to bring to the table. And I think that there are a lot of people who think, hey, Jalen Hurts is very much like Brock Purdy, kind of a system quarterback, right? He's got all kinds of great players around him, different system, but it's really more the system and the guys that he has around. Now I sound like Nick Sirianni. We're going to have systems, but I think there's a lot of people that would speculate that the system is really the more important aspect than the quarterback. And I would tell you, in regards to Brock Purdy, his ability to process things pre-snap, identify post-snap, and get to the right guy in a matter of a fraction of a second, that's what makes him special. And, he may not have, and he'll tell you point blank, I don't have the big arm. I am not, got the prototypical size of the big arm. I have to make up with it from the neck up. And I would tell you, when you talk to Jalen Hurts, man, one, the dude is stoic. The dude is he's really smart. And he's got a lot that he has to contend with at the line of scrimmage, because a lot of what he does is not only the passing game, but it's also the running game, the RPO game, and how you're going to read that stuff out. And so there is a lot there. But, we'll look at Jalen Hurts and go, well, I mean, it's an automatic conversion on 4th down and 1 because the tush push and, they tried to ban it this year and they kept it in and this, that, and the other. And so, you'll probably discredit him to a degree because of that. And I'm with you. If you're starting a franchise, you're going, hey, Burrow and Mahomes, and then you're going, hey, what about Jaden Daniels? And then you're saying, hey, listen, Lamar obviously is one of those guys that you would put in there. And, a lot of people are in love with Justin Herbert, although it hasn't, translated to playoff wins. And so, it's usually, and I will always err on the side, Richie, myself, is I will always err on the side of winning from the pocket, which Jalen Hurts does. He does plenty of, just like Lamar now does plenty of. And, but they still have that aspect that makes them dual threat guys. It makes it really hard to contain. It's just it's an interesting debate because I know that Jalen Hurts is a top 10 quarterback. Would I put him in my top 5? Probably not, but maybe. I can make an argument. At 5, I could probably argue 8 guys at number 5, right?
Yeah.
So he's
the first 4 are pretty unanimous, and they're all in the AFC. Right. And then after that,
you got Josh Allen, Mahomes, you've got Lamar, you've got obviously Burrow, and then you start looking at, all right, now who's 5? Is it it's kind of pick your flavor. Is it Hurts? Could be.
Is it Hurts? Is it Matthew Stafford? Is it Jaden Daniels, who ESPN has put in the top 5 recently? Yeah. Their analysts.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And I think, I fall victim to this as well. If you're not traditional, if you're not a traditional winning from the pocket on a consistent basis quarterback, instantly, I look at that like, well, that's where you have to win. To win championships on a consistent basis, that's where you have to win. And Jalen Hurts has proven, hey, man, I can win from there. But there's part of it. And I think I put Lamar in this category as well early in his career. I can win from there as long as everything is balanced. And that's one of the reasons that I think early in his playoff career, he didn't have a ton of success. But last year, man, I mean, the last second drive, he puts it together, has 3 big plays in there, and ends up scoring a touchdown. And then they drop the 2-point conversion. So I think it's just a really interesting conversation to have, because you can consider you still see how the league is like ever evolving at that position. I tell you what, you can do a lot worse than Jalen. Not Jalen, but you can do a lot worse than Hurts. He's right there at 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's somewhere in that category where they're all, we're all splitting hairs about greatness.
Is being a system quarterback, which you brought up just in your last response there, is being a system quarterback a bad thing? Should it be considered a taboo or a bad thing the way I feel like it is used generally in NFL conversations and things of that nature, whether it's Jalen Hurts or frankly, even Bo Nix with the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton's system, who is hand-tailored for that? Why is it considered so negative when you could also look at it from a glass half full perspective and say a system quarterback is somebody who was brought in to a larger system, because football's the ultimate name on the front, not the name on the back sport.
Right.
So this guy was brought into something larger than himself and helps that system run at its peak efficiency by playing his role and exactly what he's asked to do at the highest level. Why is that not how we look at being a system quarterback more often than not?
I don't know why it's become, an ugly, dirty 4-letter word. I think being a system, like we're all system, everybody's in a system, right? And there are certain things you do well and certain things you don't do well. So every system adjusts based upon, what you throw well, how your eyes see it, how you process that information. So, when it comes to passing, passing schematics and everything, Richie, there hasn't been a new route combination developed in the NFL in 30 years. Like, we all run the same, everybody runs the same crap. So essentially, every system has a lot of similarities. What you call it in one system, like for instance, when I was in Washington, our zone running plays were 40-50 gut and 60-70 outside. That was our zones. That's what it was called. 40-50 gut is 14-15 in the zone system, and 60-70 outside is 18-19 handoff. Same exact plays, same exact schemes, same exact everything, different terminology. And so everybody in the NFL, runs a pivot concept. Everybody runs basic. Basic is basic, right? That means basic is you've got a shallow cross and a basic, not basic. Drive is drive. So the drive concept is everybody runs a drive is a shallow cross with a basic over the top. Basic in every offense in the National Football League is a 12-yard in-cutting route, right? So drive concept is a shallow underneath with a basic over the top. Every team in the league runs that. Every team in the league runs a mesh concept where they condense formations and you run 2 shallow crosses. And, those shallow crosses are going to work as rub routes or pick routes, and somebody's going to come open off that. And usually you'll put a basic over the top of that at 12 or 14 yards. So that you have that, you're creating traffic. That's all you're doing. Everybody runs that. Like everybody runs a pivot concept. Everybody runs the same, the curl flat. Every team in the league has curl flat. Every team in the league runs scat hank. Every team in the league, every team, they're all the same thing. There's all nuance on it. So you're running a system. Running a system is important, and it's important to understand what you do well in that system. That's where I always say, hey, identity is important. And you got to make sure as a quarterback or as a player that you and the coach see the system and see the plays as the same thing. I don't know. It's like you can't operate an offense outside the system. Like Tom Brady isn't scrambling around and making plays with his feet, but I always said he's one of the best scramblers I've ever watched that never leaves the pocket. His subtle nuance, his movement skills, his feel, where he can keep his eyes down the football field and just feel where he's in the pocket. I think it's exceptional. And I used to marvel watching it. And it may be 6-inch slide here, 8-inch movement up in the pocket, just enough to create enough space to rifle one over the middle and complete it. Like that, those things are special. So, man, I don't get all into the system being a 4-letter word. I don't buy into that. But a lot of people do. And I don't know. Jalen Hurts is awesome. He's a great player. He's a Super Bowl MVP. He's balled out two times, one in a loss, and he was awesome in the loss. And then, of course, last year where they just utterly dismantled the Kansas City Chiefs, which was music to my freaking ears because I hate the Kansas City Chiefs with the white-hot intensity of 1,000 suns. Anyhow, hey, Richie, man, I appreciate you standing in. I'm going to Vandal weekend, so this will be it for this podcast. But we'll be back with you better than ever on Monday or Tuesday of next week. For everybody involved in the Stinkin Truth podcast, for Richie, I am Mark. Mike is on vacation. We'll be back with you guys next week. Thanks for watching.